The Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew, the second chapter. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising, and we have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet, 'And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel.'" Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ. Please be seated. Dear friends in Christ, grace and peace to you from God our Father and from our Lord and our Savior Jesus Christ. Amen. So you're probably wondering why we're hearing this story of the birth of Jesus and the visit of the Magi here as we're just about to enter June. As it's 80 degrees outside, or somewhere up in the 70s anyway. The sun is shining, the sky is blue. It is anything but the time when we would expect to hear this story, right? Well, hang tight. Hopefully by the end it will all make sense. If it doesn't, I'll do my best to connect the dots for you. But I want to start and talk a little bit about the month of May, because the month of May in my household is birthday month. At the beginning of the month of May, my daughter Elena has her birthday on May 8th. And at the end of the month of May, her sister Olivia, my other daughter, has her birthday on the 29th. Exactly 3 weeks apart. Now this sounds like a really good and kind of convenient thing, right? Until you kind of figure out that at the ages of 4 and 6, they really like having their own party. They like having a joint party. And they like as many parties as they can possibly have, right? So the month of May in our house has been filled with birthday. Just birthday, birthday, birthday. Kind of every time we turn around, we're either planning for a birthday, we're cleaning up from a birthday, we're wondering what we're going to do with all the gifts that the friends brought over for the birthday, and which of the gifts that were there from 3 years ago can finally get out the door to Goodwill or to someone else who could actually use these toys instead of the girls who are like, well, just fill up the closets. No, that's not what closets are for, right? But one of the things that I've really enjoyed in this birthday season is watching the two girls on their sister's birthday. And it first happened on May 8th, and Olivia, our older daughter, was so excited that her sister was going to be turning 4. And I really honestly still do not know if Olivia was more excited or Elena was more excited about Elena's birthday. Because they got up in the morning, and Olivia has this tendency to get up and be very perky anyway, at least for about 15 minutes, until the first thing that happens she doesn't plan on, and then she gets cranky. But for 15 minutes, she was thrilled, and she was excited, and she wanted to wake up her sister, and I'm like, no, don't wake up your sister. But it's her birthday, I want to wake her up. I want to give her her present. She was so excited to give Elena her present. And we had to kind of rein in that excitement for a little while until they got dressed and ready to go for their day. And then she could finally do it. But she was so excited. She was filled with joy to be able to give her present to her sister. And she wanted to see her sister's face when she gave it to her. So I don't know if that performance is what then prompted Elena to be so excited when on Thursday her sister had a birthday. And the same exact thing played out, just in the opposite roles. So Elena was so excited about Olivia's birthday. Now, she didn't feel the need to wake her sister up, nor did she have the chance, because Olivia was up and ready to go. And Olivia was excited about her birthday. But at this point, like I said, she'd already celebrated a couple of times. So in my mind, the excitement is all done. I'm like, how could you possibly be excited? But Elena had a present that she had picked out for Olivia. And it was wrapped in a bag, and so she was so excited to give it to her. And so she went into our bedroom to get it, and she came out, and she was hiding it behind her back. She was all set to go. And when she could finally place it in front of Olivia, and Olivia could reach in and pull out the tissue paper and pull out the little gift that Elena had picked out for her, Elena was just so excited. And Olivia, who looked at her little box of Legos and said, it's my favorite princess. And Elena said, I knew it was, and that's why I picked it for you. What a blessing to be able to watch those gifts of offering to one another and the excitement of bringing offering forward. Seminary professor and author Mark Allen Powell, who wrote a book called Giving to God, which talks about kind of a life of stewardship, talks about this same kind of excitement around his life of giving offerings. And about how, when he goes out and does these talks about stewardship, he takes an opportunity to talk about, how he has come to where he is in his own life of giving. And he talks about tithing and how from his paycheck he takes 10%. And he writes out the check every time he gets a paycheck and gives that offering. But then throughout the week, he talks about how he also likes to occasionally, as he's going through the store, possibly find one thing that he realizes he really doesn't need. Maybe it's a magazine or a book, or maybe it's a CD that, he'd really like to listen to, but, this day and age, you can find a lot of music on the internet. And he said, what I'd do is I would take that item, and I would look at it, and I would ask myself if I really need it. And oftentimes, when the answer is no, I'll put it back on the shelf, but not before noting how much it cost. And if it's a $12 CD, he said, I'll reach into my wallet, and I'll take out the $12, and then I'll put that in my front pocket. And he said, and all week, he said, in the evening, I'll take that $12 and set it on my dresser. And he said, and then in the morning, as I get dressed, I'll take it and I'll put it back in my pocket again. He said, all week, it reminds me that I'm setting this money aside for something special. He said, and that's the money that I take and I put into the offering in worship on Sunday morning. And he said, it's such an exciting time for me. And when he tells this story in person, he really does get just about as giddy as a 4-year-old giving or maybe receiving a birthday present. And he gets so excited about this opportunity that he has to give something to God and give this gift. And part of it is that he's giving something up, but more of it is it's this act of worship. The act of worship that's much like our Magi, who kneel down at the foot of where Mary is sitting with Jesus and offer him some gifts. But it seems, this idea that Mark Allen Powell has of giving this gift, or maybe the excitement that my daughters have around giving somebody a gift, kind of gets lost on some of us over time. And I'll be honest, when the offering plate passes me by in worship, a lot of times I'm not always excited to put that envelope into the offering plate. And sometimes I do it mechanically. And, part of it I think is too that, many of us who get paid on, bi-weekly, or maybe some get paid monthly, or particularly if you're in retirement, maybe you draw money out quarterly. And a lot of us who get paid with electronic transfers that never actually see the money change hands, we've totally changed the way we think about money. And so if we electronically transfer money into our account, and many of us then electronically transfer the money back out of our account, whether it's to pay our mortgage or our light bill or to give our offering to the church, and these are all good things because we want to use technology, and it's a great way to be able to remind us every month as we're paying our bills that, the first thing we do is we give our offering to God, and that goes to the church and the work of the church, and then we go ahead and pay all those other things, and so it all happens at the same time. But then when that offering plate goes by us in worship, a lot of times we forget that we're giving something to God in the midst of that. And as Pastor Jennifer and I have talked about, some of the things that we wanted to focus on as the summer kind of rolls around, one of the things that we talked about is we want to talk about worship and acts of worship and offering as an act of worship. Not just some passive thing that we see happen and something that goes by us in the chairs in worship, but something that we actually participate in. So this last weekend, while I was at the Synod Assembly, there were a group of people who had these solo cups. And they had rolls of quarters. And there was a word for each of the different sessions. And if whoever was speaking on the stage said that word, they would drop a quarter into their solo cup. And you kind of hear that noise that it makes, that little bit of a clink. And so this starts out, on Thursday night, and a few people are doing it, and we're getting the word a few different times. Well, this morning they kind of collaborated with the woman who was preaching, and she said, well, I know what my sermon's going to be, and I'm going to say the words vine and branches an awful lot, so I want those to be the words. And so as she was reading from John 15, which talks about I am the vine and you are the branches, and we just heard this constant clinking of quarters going on and on and on. We kept hearing these acts of worship. And it was mostly the young people who were invested in this, because let's be honest, when we're at some sort of a business meeting, a lot of the young people have a tendency to check out a little bit because they don't exactly notice what's relevant about the conversation to them. And so it's an opportunity for them to key into particular words, and to be reminded that even in a business meeting of the church, that this is an act of worship that we're doing, this time that we're spending. And then this morning in our closing worship time, they took those solo cups that they had gathered, and they had a metal pot that they poured them all into in the time of worship. And you heard this clanking of the coins as an act of worship to God. And this is a tradition that has gone on now for a couple of years at the Synod Assemblies. And part of it is it's to engage the minds of the youth and give them some things to think about and what are the words that they're hearing often. But part of it is to also remind them that worship is actually a verb. It's an action word. We're called to do more than just sit back. And, there used to be a time in the Old Testament when offerings were given in the church as completely intangible things, really. I mean, they were very tangible things. They were offerings of goats or maybe a steer or some birds. But they were offered on the altar. And then they were lit on fire. And the smoke went up to God. But the animal was burned completely. And it was a sense of trust for these people who came together in a time of worship to say, I'm going to give that to God. And I'm going to trust that all of my needs are going to be taken care of. I'm going to trust that as I give this item up, that God is going to bless me in return. Now, we've become a little more practical over time. We've said, well, that's kind of a wasteful practice in a sense. And that side of beef or that pigeon or whatever it might be could be offered up for the use of other people. And so the practice in the church then has become the idea of we offer our money, we offer the gifts that we have toward the work of the church, toward the work of God. And I think sometimes we've gotten a little distracted from that. In fact, a number of years ago, I overheard a conversation between a mother and her child as the child asked the mother, why are you putting money into that plate that's coming by? And the mother said, well, it helps pay for the cost of printing the bulletins. Well, that's good. I mean, that has to be done. If we're going to have bulletins, somebody has to pay for them. But the offering's about a lot more than that. It's about us giving to God so that God's work, God's mission and ministry can be lived out in the world. I guess it's probably hard sometimes to explain to our children that we give in the offering because God has first given to us. And so what God has given us, now we're giving back to God. And that just seems like this confusing circular logic sometimes. But it was first modeled by those magi who went before Jesus, who knelt down in front of Mary, Joseph, and the baby, to worship, to honor, to pay homage. And in that act of honoring and paying homage, they worshiped Jesus by offering these gifts that maybe weren't terribly tangible, but gifts that nonetheless required a bit of a sacrifice from them. Gifts that allowed them to connect to a story that was so much bigger than they were. So as we worship this summer at St. John's, we're going to make our offering a bit more active than it has been. Now, I'm not going to pass out solo cups to you, but if you want to play that game, we can do that. And I'm not going to ask you to drop all your quarters into a basket. But what we are going to do this summer, in the spirit of what we learned from our brothers and sisters at Akari Parish in Tanzania, is that when the time of offering comes, we're going to invite you to come forward. And instead of the offering plate coming to you, we're going to ask you to come to the offering buckets and take a moment to place your offering in the pail that's here. Now, I know that some of you give quarterly, some of you give annually, many of you do electronic giving. You'll notice in the back of the seat pocket that there's a little green card that simply says, with joy and thanksgiving, I offer my heart and my life. And if you use electronic giving, or if you give once a month, or if the conversation between you and God has been that you don't give financially in worship here, then I invite you to take one of these cards and come forward. And to think about what is it that you are giving to God in the coming week. Maybe it's the gift of your time. Many of us volunteer outside the walls of St. John's. And many of you, I'm sure, as you think about your upcoming calendar, you can think about places that you're going to be on behalf of others. Maybe it's a prayer life that's very rich, and that you pray on behalf of your family, on behalf of your church, on behalf of the world, and you do that on a regular basis. As you offer those gifts, I invite you to take this card and bring it forward and to leave it in the offering. If you are one who gives quarterly or gives monthly or doesn't give every week, take the card and think about, how is that money that you gave last week or last month or last quarter, how is that being used? Who are the people that are being impacted by that offering that has been received here at St. John's? Now we know also that there's some that aren't able to stand up and walk as well as others, and so you may choose to remain in your seat. And that's fine as well. If you'd like to have someone come and bring your offering up for you, we'll have our ushers available to be able to do that for you. We would ask that you just raise your hand in the midst of that time, and one of our ushers will come and will receive your offering on your behalf. Or maybe one of the people worshiping next to you would be happy to bring your offering forward. It's an opportunity for us to come forward and to show God with action, to engage in the life of what we do in worship. And maybe you want to just come forward with empty hands and in prayer because you're thinking, God and I keep struggling over this offering thing. And I'm not sure really where God is moving my heart. And I need to be able to respond to whatever God is asking me, to receive the message that I'm hearing from God, and to offer that, or to take that in. That's what we'll do at the time of offering. But before I end my sermon, I want to share one more story from Mark Allen Powell. He shares this in his book, Giving to God. And he talks about a young man, a young boy, who was asked by his mother to go to the town florist and get some flowers for their family dinner table. And the young man reluctantly goes, knowing that he should do what his mother asks. He goes to the table, to the florist, and he gets the flowers. And as he gets the flowers, he takes them and he kind of hides them behind his back as he's going back home. And he's constantly looking over his shoulder to see who might be noticing him as he's going. Because he doesn't want any of the other boys to notice that he has this bouquet of flowers to bring home for his family. He's afraid that, they might make fun of him and call him names. And he keeps walking and he keeps looking over his shoulder and finally makes it all the way home. Gives the flowers, puts them on the table. Well, a few years later, the same boy is in the same town. Except this time there happens to be a particular young woman who he's quite infatuated with. And so he goes back to the same florist to buy a similar bouquet of flowers. But this time, instead of hiding them behind his back, he carries them proudly through town, holding them up, actually hoping that people might see the flowers that he's holding, because he wants to offer them to this beautiful young lady. And he wants everyone to know how in love he is with this woman. May that be the joy with which we carry our offerings before God, whether they are offerings of our time, of our money, of our very selves and our prayers. May that be the image that carries us into our offering this evening.